courses on YouTube, and I've created many Python tutorials. Now I've created this complete Python course for beginners. You don't need any previous programming experience to follow along, and all you need to code in Python is a web browser. In this course, I will teach you all the core aspects of the Python programming language, and I will simplify the more complex topics. Python is considered one of the most popular programming languages in the world, and it's only growing in popularity. Python excels in a wide variety of scenarios, such as shell scripting, task automation, and web development. And it's also the language of choice for data analysis and machine learning. But it can also adapt to create games and work with embedded devices. We're going to jump right into it, so you can start coding your first Python program as soon as possible. To get started quickly, we'll use Replit, which is an online IDE that allows users to code and run programs in a variety of different languages, all in a web browser. And later, I'll show you how to get Python set up on your local operating system. After the first project, I'll go into more detail about each of the main features of Python. This section is comprehensive and detailed. And in the final section, you will use what you've been learning to code a blackjack game with me guiding you every step of the way. Throughout the course, there will be a little repetition of some of the key Python programming concepts to make sure you have a deep understanding of the language. So, let's get started. We're going to start by creating a simple rock, paper, scissors game. And we'll start by going to Replit.com. Replit provided a grant that made this course possible, and Replit is going to make it super easy to get up and running really quickly. So you can either sign up or log in and create an account. I'm just going to use my Google account. Okay, now that you're logged into Replit, you can either just click the Create button or this plus button over here to create a new Replit. And I'll make sure to create a Python Replit. But you can see you can also select all sorts of different programming languages. Oh, these are just the ones that start with the word Python. But so there's tons of different programming languages you can select. But in this case, we are just going to use Python. And then I'll click Create REPL. Okay, so let me just kind of show off Replit a little bit. This is where we're going to create our Python code. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. So we're going to write the code right here, and then we can see some output over on the right side, and then you can create different files over on the left side here. And then there's some other things, like you can connect to version control, and if you have environment variables, we're not even going to be discussing those in this course. There's a debugger, you can connect to a database, and just some other things, but we're mainly going to just be using this main.py program to write our program, and we're going to see the results in the console. So I'm just going to close this files window, so it's a little bigger here. I'm going to start off by showing you how to create a variable with Python. So this is a rock, paper, scissors game, and there's going to be a player is going to have a choice, and a computer is going to have a choice. So I'm going to create a variable called player choice, and I'm going to set that equal to rock. So let's look at a few components about this. This is the variable name, player choice. And you can see if we use an underscore, that's just kind of the convention for Python to use an underscore if you're going to have a space in the variable name. And we're going to assign it, that's what this equal sign, this is the assign operator, and we're going to assign it to a string. A string is just a word or a collection of characters like rock, and we're going to put quotation marks around it. Now we could have also used single quotes instead of double quotes. As long as you use the same quote on each side, that's what's important. So we've now created a variable called player choice and assigned it to rock. And now we can reference this variable later, and whenever we reference the variable called player choice, it's going to, the code is going to automatically replace that player choice with rock. So this is going to be a very interactive project. I hope you're following along. I hope you have already got Replit loaded up like this. Now throughout this project, I'm going to tell you what the next thing to do is, and I want you to try doing it yourself before you watch what I'm going to do. So periodically you'll want to pause the video based on what I say and try to implement what I say before you come back to the video and watch me implement it and see if you've implemented it the same way. So I'm just going to zoom in one more time, and this is the first thing I want you to do. See if you can make another variable on the next line. So you're going to press return or enter to go to the next line. And this variable should be called computer choice. And you should set it to equal paper. Okay, so you can pause the video and see if you can make a variable called computer choice and set it to equal paper. So here, it's pretty simple here. It's going to start simple, but it's going to get harder as we go. So computer choice equals paper. Okay, so like I said, it's starting simple, but it's going to get more complex as we go along. If you've done that, you've now written your first line of Python code in this course. Okay, now I'm going to talk about functions. A function is a set of code which only runs when it is called. So I'm going to show you how to put this code into a function. Now, one thing about Python is that indentation is very important. So after we define the name of a function, any line of code that's indented the same amount is considered within that function. So I'm going to create a new line of code at the top, and I'm going to call it get choices. Okay, so we define the function with def and get choices. And I'm going to select all these two lines of code at the same time and just press the tab key. And that's going to indent all of these the same amount. And you can see sometimes there'll be squiggly lines, and if you hover over some of the squiggly lines, it will tell you something. In this case, it just says the local variable called player choice is assigned to but never used. That's not necessarily bad. It's just telling us that usually if you create a variable, you're going to want to use it later. Well, we are going to use it later. We just haven't gotten to it yet. So sometimes the squiggly lines will indicate there's some sort of error in the code. Usually, I think it's the color red will indicate an error. But if it's a different color, it just may mean that there's something maybe not quite right, but it's not really that big of a deal. So if you have a variable that's assigned to but never used, that's not going to stop your program, but it's just saying that this variable isn't really being used for anything yet. But we will change that. This function, I'm going to show you how to call a function later, but we're creating a function called getChoices that assigns these two variables, and it's also, I'm going to put another line at the very end here, and it's a return statement. And I'm going to return player choice. This will indicate what's returned when this function is called. So later we'll call this function getChoices, and it will return something. It will return the player choice, which is right here. It will return, in this case, rock, that we can use somewhere else in our code. And I did just happen to put an extra line here. That's optional. I put a blank line here just to kind of make things easy, to kind of organize the code a little bit. So sometimes I'll just put an extra line between different sections of code, and it just makes it easier to identify the different sections when you're looking at the code. For the computer, those extra lines don't mean anything. The indentation, though, definitely does mean something. So as long as every line of code is indented the same amount as the previous line of code, then it's all within the same function. Okay, so this is what I want you to do. See if you can change the return statement. So instead of returning player choice, it's returning the computer choice. So that's pretty simple. It's now returning the computer choice here. Now I'm going to create another function down here. This is just going to be an example function just so I can demonstrate something to you, and then we'll delete it. It's not going to be part of our rock, paper, scissors game. But I'm going to create a new function called greeting. And then I am going to add what it's going to do. Oh yeah, put the semicolon. You also, or no, a colon. So a function always has to have a colon at the end of how we define it. So I'm going to return a string, and it's just going to say, hi. And one thing you'll notice is that you don't have to put anything at the end of each line. Some programming languages, such as JavaScript, you're going to put a semicolon at the end of a line. But in Python, it doesn't matter. You don't put anything at the end of each line. So now I'm going to call the function. To call the function, I just type the name, and I put the parentheses at the end. So it's going to say, so greeting is now going to call, it's going to call this function, and that's going to return the string hi. Now it's not going to do anything with the string because our program doesn't do anything with the string that's been returned. It's not going to go into the console or anything. But let's add additional code so we will make this string hi go onto the console. First, let me create a variable that takes what this greeting function returns. So I'm going to type in response equals greeting. So now we set what greeting is being returned to this variable called response. And now I can use the print function, and I can print the response, and this will print it to the console. So now we have this green button here. This runs the program. I'll click this green button here, and now we can see it's hi. So this response is getting this hi from here, and then we're printing it right there. Okay, I'm actually going to delete all of this. And what I want you to try to do now is to call the getChoices function and store the response in a variable called choices, and then print the value of choices to the console. So you can pause and try that really quick, and then I'm going to show you how. Okay, so remember the variable is called choices, and we're going to set that equal to the getChoices variable. Now, or the getChoices function. Now, instead of typing out getChoices, you can see that this code editor is actually giving us suggestions on what we want to put in here. So I just typed in get, and you can see it's now saying getChoices right here. So I can actually, instead of typing out the whole thing, I can either click there, or I can just press the tab key, and it's going to fill in the rest of that function name. So that's just something little that makes it easier to write a program, and you don't have to type out every single thing. So if you've already created a function or a variable, then the code editor, then Replit will suggest what you may want to fill in when you're typing. And most other code editors do something similar. It's called code completion. So I'm going to, but I still have to add parentheses at the end. And now I'm going to print the choices. Okay, so I'm going to just click this play button to make sure it does what we're trying to do. Yep, it clicked paper. Great. Now let's talk about dictionaries. Dictionaries in Python are used to store data values in key value pairs. So let me just show you an example. Okay, so a dictionary is going to have these curly braces at the beginning and end, and then here's a key value pair. There's one, it's separated by a comma, and then here's another key value pair. So we're setting name, we're setting that to equal bow, and we're setting the color to equal blue. So here's the key, here's the value. Here's the key, here's the value. And the key, or the value in a dictionary, can be a variable. Like the color, we could set that. We already created this variable here. I'm just going to copy the word choices, and we can put choices. And you can see now it's not surrounded by the quotation marks. So if you surrounded by quotation marks, it's a string. But if we don't surround it by quotation marks, it's getting the variable here, choices. So this would be set to paper, because that's what choice is going to equal. So we're about to delete this line because that was just an example. But now, before the return statement in this function, we're going to add a new line. We're going to create a variable named choices and make it equal to a dictionary. The first key should be player with a value of the player choice, actually this variable here. The second key should be computer with a value of computer choice. And then we're going to update the return statement to return the choices dictionary. Now, I'm not going to keep telling you to pause and try it yourself. So just the rest of this time, whenever I say what we're going to do, you'll know that after I get done explaining it, you can pause it and try it yourself. But that's what we're going to do now. So I'm going to create choices, and it's going to be a dictionary, and then it's going to have a player, that's the key, and the value is going to be player choice. And I was just able to press tab to fill that in. And then we're going to have computer, and it's going to be computer choice. And you can see sometimes if it goes to the next line, there just won't be a line number right here. But I can move this over for now. And then I am going to, oh, I forgot to put the equal sign. That's what that red squiggly line means. So, because the red means there is a problem in the program, so it's not going to run correctly. Now, the orange just means that we haven't used choices yet, which we will right now, because we're going to return choices. Choices. Okay, so now we don't have any squiggly lines because we're using every variable that we created, and we're returning choices here. So you may have noticed that player choice, it does not actually get set to the player's actual choice. So let's fix that. The input function gets input from a user, and we'll use it to get the player's choice. So instead of having player's choice equal rock, we're going to make player's choice input, enter a choice. Rock, paper, scissors. Okay, so this is how you get input from a user. We use the input function, and this is going to be something that's going to be printed. We'll print to the console here, and whatever the result of this input will be that the user entered will get stored to this variable, which we then can use later in our program. So let's just try that out. I'll click run and enter it. Let me just stop and run it again. Okay, enter a choice, rock, paper, scissors. I'll just put rock. And now you can see the player's choice, we're still printing that, and it's going to print as rock. Great, now let's just clean up this code a little bit. We still have this here, we don't need that dictionary, that's not going to be part of our final code. And now we'll make it so the computer can actually make a choice. So we're going to learn about importing libraries, creating lists, and calling methods. Python libraries are a set of useful functions, so you don't have to write code from scratch. When you import a library to your program, you get access to more features without writing additional code. With basic Python, it's challenging to get your program to do something randomly, but it's easy to choose something randomly using the random library. So let me show you how we can import the random library. Import statements are used to import libraries, and they're usually put at the top of a program. So I'm going to press enter a few times here to add some lines at the top, and I'm going to do import random. So now we've imported the random library. So we're going to use that random library soon, but now let's learn about lists. A list in Python is used to store multiple items in a single variable. Lists are surrounded by brackets, and each item is separated by a comma. So here's an example. I could create a variable called food and set it to this list. It's going to have 3 items: pizza, carrots, and eggs. So this is a list of strings. And then you can also get a random item from the list. We're going to use now, we've imported random, we can get a random item by using that random library. So I'm going to put dinner equals random.choice. And then I'm going to pass in the list here. So using that random library, we can call choice, and then we can pass in a list, and it's going to choose a random item from that list and set it to equal this dinner variable. So right now the computer choice always equals paper, but we want it to be a random choice between rock, scissors, and paper. So before the computer choice variable is created, we'll create a new variable called options and assign it to a list of the possible options, rock, paper, scissors. Then we'll set the computer choice variable to be a random choice of one of the items in the options list. Okay, I hope you already tried this now, but let me show you how that's going to work. We'll create options, and we'll set it equal to this list of rock, paper, scissors. And you can see the code editor will often pop up these boxes with more information about what we're doing to give us some help with what we're trying to do here. So we're going to set this computer choice to be random.choice food. Not food, I was looking at food down there. This is going to be options. There we go. And let's just try running this program and seeing what happens. So I'm going to put rock, and then we see the computer chose scissor. It should be scissors. That's why we're testing it out. I guess I spelled that wrong. Okay, so scissors with an S. So now let me try running it again. And you can see it shows scissors, but if we run it enough time, it should, now it's choosing paper because it's choosing it at random. Okay, that's working. Okay, so now let's just delete all this code after the getChoices function. We don't need to test that getChoices function anymore. And now let's create a new function called checkWhen. So you should know enough about how to create a function. So def checkWhen. So this is just an empty function with nothing inside it yet. But before we add, with the colon. So before we add any code inside the function, we're going to create some arguments. Functions can receive data when they're called. The data are called arguments. So when creating a function, you can specify arguments inside the parentheses. So we've been using this empty parentheses, but I can put in things within these parentheses. When this function is called, we're going to give it two pieces of data, or we're going to pass two pieces of data into the function. The first piece of data is going to be player. The second piece of data is going to be computer. So you can basically call these anything you want. These are just, we're creating new variables, but when we call these functions, we'll pass in two pieces of information that will then be assigned to the variable names player and computer that we can use inside the function. So for now, let's finish off for a complete function. The function has to have some code within the function. So let's just add a return statement that's just going to return a list containing the elements player and computer. So this checkWhen function shouldn't actually return this. This is just to kind of get it quickly created. It should actually return different things depending on the player and computer arguments. An if statement will allow a program to do different things depending on certain conditions. So an if statement will first check a condition, and if the condition is true, then all the lines of code under the if statement that are indented the same amount will execute. So as a quick example, I can say A equals 3, B equals 5, and then we can create an if statement here. If A is greater than B, then we will do something like print yes. Or we can do if A is less than B, or we can do, if we want to check if A and B are equal, we can do equal, we'll put two equal signs. Now this is very important. You never want to use one equal sign because a single equal sign is the assignment operator. That's how you assign what variables are equal to. So if you use a single equal sign, or like, then if I put if A single equal sign B without a double equal sign, that is going to set A to equal B, which is not what we want. The double equal sign is going to check if A and B are the same value. Basically, it checks if two values are equal. Now, you can also do a not equal. So if you use the exclamation point, that's not equal. Or you can use less than or equal to, or you can do more than or equal to. So I'm just going to delete all this for now. So now we're going to update this return statement. Before the return statement, we're going to check if player equals computer. And if so, if true, we'll return the string, it's a tie. So let's do that. If player equals computer, and this is something that maybe you figured out yourself before you're watching this, we'll return a string, and the string is going to be, it's a tie. Okay, so now it's only going to return, so a function does not have to return something. And for this function, it's only going to return something if this is true, if player equals computer. If not, it won't return anything. And just to make you notice this, see, this line is indented within the if statement, which is indented within this function. And just a really quick thing to note, for a return statement, parentheses are optional. So I could also add parentheses like that, but you don't need them. But for now, I'm just going to get rid of them. So currently, when there's a tie, the program now returns it's a tie. But how does the player know that's true? Now let's have the program print which options that the player and the computer chose. You can concatenate strings with the plus operator. That just means you can combine strings with other strings or strings with variables. So let me show you how you can print which options were chosen. So I'm going to do print. You chose, and then I'll put player. So you chose, and then we have to add a space here because it's going to print a space, and then it will print this. So if the player chose rock, it will say you chose rock. And then we can so we concatenated these together, but we can add another plus sign and put another string here, and it's going to say computer chose, oh, it's like being covered up here by everything. Computer chose. Now, I'm just about to type it in, but see if you can figure out what to add at the end here to put in what the computer chose. So, computer chose computer, or the value of this variable here. So a lot of times with programming, there's a bunch of ways to do the same thing. So this is one way to combine strings and variables together. There's another way that's a little simpler called an f-string. So an f-string will allow you to mix strings with variables and other Python code. So to do that, you just put a variable, or you just put f at the beginning of a string. So let me just give you an example. So we do age equals 25. We're going to create a variable, and then I'm going to make an f-string. We'll make it a print statement, and I'm going to put a string in here, but instead of starting with a quotation mark, it's going to start with an f. And then I'm going to put Jim is, and then whenever you want to put a variable or any kind of Python code, we're going to put some curly braces. And I'm just going to put the variable within the curly braces. And so years old. And I'll put the end of the string, or let me put a period here. Okay, so Jim is age, which is going to be 25 years old. So the f-string is just a slightly simpler way to combine the strings and the variables. So what I want you to do, see if you can figure out how to update this line right here so it uses an f-string and it uses these curly braces instead of all these pluses up there. So yeah, we're going to put f, and I can delete a lot of these things here. And then I'm going to put some curly braces. You chose player. There we go. Okay, you chose, there was a comma right here. You chose player, computer chose computer. Okay, so now we've been able to put in the variable within this string with the f-string. So we're going to test this out. So in a code, the code in this function never gets run. So when we press the run button, it's not going to run any of the code within the function unless the function is called within the program. So we're not going to test out this function all right now. What I want you to do is see if you can add a line to call the check when function, and then just call it with rock and paper. So we're going to just do check when rock, or actually we have to pass in strings here, rock, paper. So this is it's going to call this function with rock instead of player, and paper instead of computer. So let me try running this program. You chose rock, computer chose paper. And just don't worry about these little icons here. Sometimes they just block what's in there, but it's still behind that little search icon. So it's doing you chose rock, computer chose paper. Now let's get back to checking the winner. So far, this function is only going to check if there's a tie. Now we'll start adding code to check different win conditions. So let's learn about else and elif statements. Okay, so down here I'm just going to paste an example. So here's the if statement. If age is greater than or equal to 18, it's going to print this. Else, so anytime this is not true, then it's going to print you are a child. Okay, now here I've combined it with something else. The elif statement. Elif just stands for else if. It combines else and if, so you have to put a condition. So if age is greater than or equal to 18, print you are an adult. Else if, now we're going to check if age is greater than 12, you are a teenager. Else if age is greater than 1, print you are a child. Or else if none of these other things are true, we'll just print you are a baby. So, and it's only going to do one of these. It's going to get to once it gets to the first one that's true, then it's not going to check the rest. It's just going to kind of go to the next line of code after all these statements. So it's just going to choose one, and then once it gets to the first one that's true, then it's going to be done with this whole section of code. You can also check for two conditions at once. Let me give you an example. I'm just going to delete all this code, and I'm going to create an elif statement here. Elif, else if, and we're going to check if player is equal to rock, and I'm just going to type in the word and computer is equal to scissors. So now I'm checking if both these conditions have to be true. So this condition and this condition have to be true before the following statement will happen, which we're going to just put return rock smashes scissors. You win. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do, let's see if you can figure out how to do this. We're going to add another elif statement, and this time we'll check if player is equal to rock and computer is equal to paper. And if so, we'll return paper covers rock, you lose. So we're going to make this kind of easier by just copying this code, and then I'm just going to paste in this, and then I'll just change this. So players equal to rock, and computer is equal to paper instead of scissors. Paper. And it's going to say paper covers rock. You lose. And we won't even have an exclamation point anymore because it's not exciting to lose. Okay, and you can kind of see there's we could add a few more elif statements to cover all the different situations. But instead we're going to talk about refactoring. Refactoring is the process of restructuring code while keeping the original functionality. When creating a program, it's common to refactor code to make it simpler or more understandable. So we are actually going to refactor this code that I've highlighted now, and we are going to instead use a nested if statement. A nested if statement will make the code more understandable at a quick glance. So you can put an if statement inside another if, else, or elif statement. So you'll notice here, the first elif statement is if player equals rock, and the second elif statement is if player equals rock. So see if you can figure out how to refactor this to not have to use the and anymore. We're just going to use one if statement and one elif statement, and then an if statement under that elif statement. If that doesn't make sense, you can just see what I do right now. So I'm going to just move this down a little bit. I'm going to actually copy and paste some of these items, but we're going to start with elif player equals rock. We're not going to have this. I'm going to put this on a new line and say if computer equals scissors. So first we're going to check if player equals rock, and then if so, we're then going to check, it's going to be a nested if statement, if computer equals scissors. And if computer equals scissors, then we're going to use this return statement here. So I have to make sure it's indented correctly. It's going to, so this is what we have player, if player equals rock, then if computer equals scissors, we'll return, oh, this needs to be indented one more time to be inside that if statement. And now we don't even need this elif statement. This can just be an else statement. Else, because if the computer equals scissors, there's only one other option, because we already know if player equals rock and computer equals rock, we'll have already returned it's a tie. And by the way, once you return something, the rest of the code in a function does not run. So if we're returning it's a tie, nothing else after that is going to run. So we know that computer can't equal the rock at this point. So it's either going to be scissors or paper. So we don't even have to check if computer equals paper, because at this point, computer has to equals paper. And then we'll just return this line. Let's see. There we go. Return paper covers rock, you lose. So now we just basically have to add two more sections similar to this. So this one is if player equals rock. Then we have to have another section if player equals paper. And then if player equals scissors. And then we just have to have the stuff inside is going to be pretty similar, just corresponding to the different relationships between rock, paper, scissors. So I'm just going to copy that, and then I will paste it here. And then one thing important, you have to make sure this elif statement lines up with this elif statement. And this is now going to be paper. And then we are going to check if computer equals rock. And if computer equals rock, then we will say that paper covers rock. You win. Or we'll say scissors cuts paper, you lose. And then the final one, which at this point I'm sure you can figure out on your own, we're going to add one more section, and if player equals scissors. And then first we're going to check if computer equals paper. If so, we will do scissors cuts paper. We're just making it so every time the first one is you win and the second one is you lose. But you could do it the other way around. And then we will do rock smashes scissors. You lose. Okay, we're almost finished with this whole program. So both the get choices function and the check win function, they're both complete. Now we'll add code to call the functions and play the game. So first, let's remove this check win. Now we'll create a variable called choices and make it equal to the result of calling the get choices function. And we just have to make sure it's not indented. It's on the first column, I guess right here, not indented at all. So we'll do choices equals get choices. And one thing about this is it's going to return a dictionary. So if we look at the get choices, so it's returning choices, and it's going to be a dictionary like this. Now, let me just copy this. I'm going to show you something down here. I'm going to just paste it down here, and we'll just make it an example of what it could look like. It could look like rock and paper. I always use rock and paper as examples because scissors is a little harder for me to spell. so that's a little easier. So one thing we haven't talked about is how to access a specific element within a dictionary. So this is a dictionary. So let's say if I call this, well, I'll just call it choices, even because we're going to delete that, and so we're only going to have this choices. But if choices equals this, and let's say I just want to get the choice of the player, let me show you how I would do that. I'll just do p choice for player choice, and I'm going to put equal choices, and to get just the value of the player, I'm going to put brackets. So the brackets look like that, and then I have to put the key that I want the value of. So the key would be player. So if I put the name of the dictionary, which is this, and then I put some brackets. We're going to use brackets to identify what is the key that we want the value of. So here's the key with the value of rock, and here's a key with a value of paper. So this is how we can get the player choice, and I'm sure you can see how you get the computer choice. If we take this computer word and put it right here, computer. Okay, I'm just going to get rid of all this here, and we have the get choices here. And now listen carefully to what we're going to do next. We are going to create a variable called result and make it equal to the result of calling the check-win function. And when we call the check-win function, we're going to pass in the value of the player key and the computer key of the choices dictionary. So let's do that. So then you'll see what I mean. Result is going to be, we're going to call check-win, and then we are going to pass in, we have choices player and choices computer. So, because remember I showed the example of that dictionary. So we're getting the player key, the value of the player key, and the value of the computer key. So now we know who wins. This result variable is going to be one of these strings that have been returned. Either it's a tie, rock space scissors, paper coded rocks, and so on. So now we just have to print the result. We're going to print the result. Okay, we can try out this game. I'm going to just click the run button. Okay, this is why it's sometimes better to test a little earlier. I just forgot the semicolon on some of these. So semicolon, and see there's a red arrow. I should have seen that. Semicolon and semicolon. Okay, now let's try it. I'm gonna play the program, enter a choice. I'm gonna do rock. And I just noticed something else I want to change. So enter choice. Yeah, it starts with, there's a parenthesis here. There's no parentheses at the end. So again, I'm just going to change that really quick. So enter a choice, and we're going to put it in parentheses here, and test it again. So rock. Okay, you chose rock. Computer chose rock. It's a tie. Okay, I'm going to play it again. Paper. You chose paper. Computer chose scissors. Scissors cuts paper. You lose. Okay, we just created a Python game. So hopefully this gives you a better understanding of what it's like to program in Python, and you now know about some of the basic concepts of Python. Now there's a lot more to learn in Python, and we're going to be covering a lot more in this course. I just wanted to start with a game and a full program, so just right off the bat you could code a program. So in the next section, I'm going to start going over in detail all the most common features of Python. And we're going to cover some of the features that we've already used in this game, plus a lot of additional features, additional common features that were not used in this game. And then in the final section of the course, we're going to code a more complex game, a blackjack game. So let's get started with the next section. One of the quickest and easiest ways to get started with Python is by using Replit.com. But you may also want to get Python running on your local computer. So if you want to do that, you can start by going on over to python.org, and then you just go to the downloads menu, and then you're going to just click what you want to download for. So it's going to default to be for you the operating system you're on, but you can also go to other platforms and make sure you can, and then just find the platform that you want to download on. And there's going to be instructions on here that's going to tell you how to go about getting installed on your specific computer. So there's a few different ways to run a Python programs, and one of the ways is with an interactive prompt. So after you get installed, if you open up your terminal and type in Python, or sometimes it's going to be Python 3, depending on how you got it installed, you're going to see this interactive prompt. And then you can just, this is called a Python REPL. It's different from a REPL created with Replit, but you can start coding in Python right on here. So I could say name equals bow, and then you have to make sure you put the quotation marks at the end, and now I've gotten a variable stored as bow, and then I can just type in the variable name, and it's going to show me the value of the variable. And you can type in most different Python commands right into this interactive prompt here. And then I can just quit it when I'm ready to quit. It's also common to run Python using Visual Studio Code. So if you just search for Visual Studio Code, you can get to the download page, and then you can just download it for your system. And there's also, you can download for different systems. And then once you open up Visual Studio Code, to get Python working, you're going to want to install the Python extension.